Hello and welcome to A Critical Dragon, where I talk about narrative in film, television, and in books. And obviously, from the title of my video, you're going to know where I'm going to settle on this next question. But this video is, I wanted to talk a little bit about the construct of morally grey characters, why we find them desirous, and why I'm relating this to the character of Icarium. And the reason Icarium popped into my head was, for one reason or another, I was thinking which single character in the Malazan Book of the Fallen is personally responsible for killing the greatest number of people? Because let's face it, killing someone is usually bad. And, there were a number of the usual candidates cropped up. Calor, for instance. Calor, he's pretty much presented as an evil character. He's been around for millennia. People blame him for a lot of deaths. He was a warlord and a general and a king. And yet, anyone who watches my channel knows that this channel kind of comes down on the hashtag Calor did nothing wrong. Yes, an exaggeration, but ultimately I feel like Calor gets a very bad reputation and it's not always deserved. And when we think about it, a lot of the death associated with Calor is actually other people. Because the major wiping out of continents and an entire kingdom being killed off, that wasn't Calor, that was the people trying to kill Calor. So it's a roundabout way of trying to pin all those deaths on him, but he personally didn't go around and kill all those people. And the next sort of obvious character that springs to mind would be Animander Rake, or any of the Teist characters. But even Rake, who has been around for hundreds of thousands of years, has not killed that many people personally. Yes, he's killed quite a lot, and over the span of 300,000 years or so, there's going to be a fair number. But Dragnapur is filled with the guts of an army, not hundreds of armies. So we know that Rake actually hasn't killed that many people. And also, when we see Rake, he is at the stage in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, certainly reticent to kill people. And he doesn't kill that many people in the books. So I think we can strike Rake off this list as well. And then we think, well, what about the Imass? And certainly collectively, the Imass have killed a lot of people. They have wiped out cities, a lot, but at least a couple of cities that we know of. And so we know that collectively, the Imass have killed a lot of people. But individually, no, not so much. Even though they've been around again for hundreds of thousands of years, individually, they may have racked up quite a few kills, but we're not talking staggering numbers. It's them acting as a collective is generally the thing that is discussed. And even then, when we hear about the Jagat Wars, we see one of the Jagat Wars that the Imass engaged in, and it was against a woman and her two kids. So I have a funny feeling that maybe some of the Imass numbers we overestimate in our heads. And what about Karsa? But Karsa, when we see him, is a relatively young man. We see him go on his journey. And ultimately, by the end of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, he hasn't killed that many people. Yes, he's killed a lot. He's been violent. But he hasn't killed that many. And that's why, you've seen the title of the video. You know where I'm going with this. I actually think it's possible that Icarium has killed the greatest number of people personally. Now, we could look at Rake as a tyrant and controlling the Imass and orchestrating their deaths. And that may be a contender, but Rake was located to basically the area around Darujistan. Icarium, on the other hand, has destroyed multiple cities, multiple villages, has rampaged across entire continents, and has been around killing people for hundreds of thousands of years. He has amassed a staggering number of deaths that he is personally responsible for. And this surprised me when I was thinking about it, because I never think of Icarium as a mass murdering genocidal maniac. And yet, the evidence is all there in the text. We hear of these cities that are left in absolute ruins, where there's only shards of pottery left and pieces of mechanisms that Icarium had built. And of course, Mappo is looking at him and trying to hide the fact that, yeah, you built this and then you killed everyone. We also know that Icarium set up the laws that led to the creation of Karsa and that entire warrior culture. So one step removed from Icarium himself, he created an entire culture that went around raping and killing and murdering. Icarium, when you start thinking about it, is horrendous. He's a monster. But balanced against that is the fact that Icarium is an amnesiac. He has no memory of this. And when we see Icarium in a state of calm, particularly when he's accompanied by Mappo, we see someone who is generally quite gentle and caring. And he is a hunter. He has a sword. He has a bow. He will hunt to feed them. He will fight things to protect them. But he doesn't seek out to murder anyone. He seems like quite a gentle and nice person. And that friendship between Mappo and Icarium that the narrative focuses on and emphasizes to us, that builds this picture of Icarium as almost like a gentle giant, as someone who has been afflicted with a terrible curse. And because that is really the first way that we meet him, we form a very positive impression of Icarium. We look at him in a very positive light. And because he is an amnesiac, because he is afflicted with this problem with his memory, we find it almost unfair that he is being judged by the actions that he performed in the past that he has no memory of. And it seems so out of character for the person that we see on the page. But over the course of the series, we do see the fear in Mappo's eyes when Icarium starts to get angry at Tremolor. And rather than have Icarium lose himself to rage, Mappo knocks him out. His friend, this person that he is caring for, this person that he has spent hundreds of years with, he attacks his friend and then lies to him about it. And so there is a dark side to Icarium. And then later on in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, we see when the Eater turn Icarium against the forces guarding the throne. And Icarium begins to lose himself in rage. And Troll manages to stand against him for a short time, but Icarium's rage builds and builds. And suddenly we get this sense that there are two sides to Icarium. There's this side that when he is placid and calm is a nice person. But when he becomes enraged, he becomes destruction incarnate. Now, here's an interesting question then. Is it still Icarium? Do we still judge him for what happens when he loses his temper? Is he like the Hulk, where, you know, Bruce Banner is a nice guy, and then he turns into the Hulk, and Banner cannot be held responsible for what the Hulk does? Is it a Jekyll and Hyde, where these are meant to be two separate personalities? Although, you know, that's not really the point of Stevenson's book, but that's a different video. But when it comes to Icarium, he is still Icarium. He loses his temper and he kills people. and then eventually wakes up, has a bit of a hangover, and goes, oh, what happened? Oh, this is all terrible. What happened here? And we are meant to forgive him. So is Icarium a tragic monster, or is this a monstrous tragedy? Who are the victims here? And the victims are clearly the people that Icarium murders. But is Icarium a victim? Because we find out that his amnesia was caused when he tried to free his father, and the magical injury he sustained caused his amnesia, caused him to lose control. And so it is as if he has suffered a magical brain injury, and it leads to something he can't control. And this is where we start to dig down into really interesting questions about morality, about how we perceive morality, about how we judge people's actions. Because if you met someone on the street and they go, oh, when I lose my temper, I go around and hit people, you go, you are a terrible person. Find ways to keep control of your temper. We would never forgive someone who had a short fuse, and when they lost their temper, they went around punching people. That's a bad person. That's someone with anger management issues that needs those dealt with, and they cannot avoid the repercussions of their actions by claiming, oh, well, when I lose my temper, I just go a bit mad and hit people. We would never excuse that. But if someone's had a brain injury and they have no control over it, does that move it into a different category? Because this is getting into issues about control and conscience and about cognition. And this is what I find so fascinating about Icarium as a character. Icarium's journey, how we feel about it, how we feel the positive aspects about his relationship with Mappo, how we dislike Tarlac Veed for supplanting Mappo. We feel very positive about those things, and we come to care for Icarium, and we see him very much as a victim, as someone who needs to be taken care of, as someone who is deep down inside a nice guy. But we are constantly reminded and shown and confronted by the consequences of Icarium's actions. Hundreds of thousands of people, entire cities and civilizations wiped out because of Icarium. And how can we justify those two things? They are the same person. Icarium is responsible for these things. But does it make him evil? Can he still be good? And that's why I find Icarium a really fascinating character, because we talk about how we want morally gray characters. And when you think about it, someone who is morally gray is not always good and not always evil, i.e., a character, a well-rounded character. That's basically what morally gray means. That sometimes they make good decisions, the right decisions, the moral decisions, and sometimes they do things that are morally ambiguous or maybe a bit shady. That is everyone, because not everyone is a paladin. Not everyone is a knight errant who is absolutely pure white in terms of morality and their soul is glowing. And if they choose to steal a loaf of bread to feed their family, Jean Valjean, that is committing a crime. But we get into the complexity of theft versus the moral virtue of feeding someone who is starving. And it's complicated and interesting. But ultimately, it's someone breaking the law and stealing from someone else in order to do another good. Robin Hood steals from the rich and gives to the poor. He's a great guy. Robin, not of the Hood, steals from the rich and keeps it. Well, he's just bad then. But he steals from the rich, keeps it, and then buys a lot of stuff and supports the local economy. Suddenly, things get very complex when we actually start thinking about things in real terms instead of the simplified form that we have in narrative. And Icarium, I keep coming back to Icarium because Icarium is a character that we like, that we care about, that we are invested in. And yet, in terms of the number of people killed, he's pretty much the greatest monster in the whole of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. Far more so than Calor, far more so than any of the Segula, far more so than any of the Teist characters. He is responsible for more death and destruction, even than the combined Talan and Imass. And that is a fascinating paradox. But anyway, I wanted to talk about it. It just popped into my head, and I thought this was an interesting one. Where is it that we draw the line? Why is it that we are so willing to forgive him when it is his rage? They are his actions. He is responsible. But thank you very much for watching. Thank you for your continued support, and I'll see you in the next one.